HR said follow policy exactly. So I did. 3 weeks later, the CEO fired my manager in front of the entire department, and everyone in that room finally understood why I never raised my voice once during the whole thing. My name doesn't matter for this story, but my job does. I worked as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company outside Dallas. I scheduled trucks, tracked inventory, and made sure orders left the warehouse on time. It was not glamorous work, but I was good at it, and for 4 years nobody complained. Then we got a new regional manager named Derek. Derek came from corporate with a haircut too sharp for a warehouse and a habit of saying words like optimize and synergy like they meant something. Within his first month, Derek decided our department was inefficient. He never asked why things worked the way they did. He just assumed everyone before him was lazy. Derek's biggest obsession was policy compliance. He printed out the entire employee handbook, highlighted sections in yellow, and told us in a meeting that from now on, every single procedure would be followed to the letter. No shortcuts, no exceptions, no using common sense to speed things up, because common sense, in his words, was not in the handbook. Everyone nodded along, because you don't argue with a man who just got promoted and wants to prove himself. But something in me sat up straight. I had read that handbook. I had read it more carefully than Derek ever had, because I liked knowing exactly what I was and wasn't required to do. And I knew something Derek didn't. Following that handbook exactly, word for word, would slow this warehouse down to a crawl. I decided not to warn him. The first policy Derek enforced was the double verification rule for outgoing shipments. On paper, it required 2 employees to independently check every order before it left the building, sign separate forms, and have a supervisor countersign before the truck could leave. For years, we had used a simplified version, 1 quick scan and a single signature, because the full process was written for a much smaller warehouse decades ago. Nobody had updated it because nobody had ever needed to. Derek told us in front of the whole team that from now on we do it exactly as written. No skipping steps. I asked him directly in front of witnesses, "Are you sure you want the full double verification process, including supervisor sign-off on every single shipment?" He looked at me like I had asked something insulting and said, "Did I stutter? Follow the policy exactly." So I did. That same afternoon, shipments that used to take 10 minutes to clear started taking 45. Every truck needed 2 workers pulled from loading duty just to verify paperwork, plus Derek's own signature, which meant every single truck had to wait for Derek personally, because he refused to delegate that authority to anyone else. He wanted to be the one in control. By the end of day 1, 6 trucks were still sitting in the lot at closing time. Drivers were furious. Some had schedules with other pickups lined up hundreds of miles away, and every minute they sat in our lot was a minute they were losing money somewhere else. One driver stood in the office doorway for 20 minutes straight, arms crossed, asking why a process that used to take him 10 minutes now had him parked here past dinner. Dispatchers from client companies started calling, asking why deliveries were suddenly late. One client asked flat out if our warehouse was having staffing problems. Derek blamed the warehouse staff for being slow. He stood in front of everyone the next morning and said productivity needed to improve immediately. Nobody corrected him. Nobody wanted to be the one who pointed out that this was exactly what he demanded, word for word, in a meeting he had insisted on recording himself. I kept my expression neutral every single day. I filled out every double verification form completely, in full detail, exactly as the handbook required, including the optional comments section that most supervisors never bothered filling out. I wrote detailed, accurate notes on every delay, every wait time, every reason a truck sat idle. I was not sabotaging anything. I was documenting reality with painful precision. By the second week, the backlog was undeniable. Trucks were leaving so late that some clients started threatening to cancel contracts. Corporate started asking regional managers for weekly performance reports. Derek, panicking, tried to quietly go back to the old faster system, telling a few of us privately just do the quick version like before, don't worry about the extra forms. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You told us to follow policy exactly, no exceptions, so that's what I'm doing. I don't want to get in trouble for going off script again." Derek didn't have a comeback for that. He had painted himself into a corner with his own words, in front of witnesses, in a recorded team meeting that HR had insisted on logging for training purposes. Then Derek made his second mistake. Instead of admitting the policy needed updating, he tried to blame individual employees for the slowdown. He pulled records and specifically named me in an email to his superior, claiming I was intentionally slowing down operations and undermining his leadership. He requested a formal write-up against me for insubordination. That email reached HR. HR pulled the handbook. HR pulled the meeting recording where Derek clearly stated, word for word, that every policy must be followed exactly with no exceptions and no shortcuts. HR pulled my documentation, which showed I had followed every single procedure completely and accurately, with timestamps, signatures, and detailed notes proving good faith effort at every step. There was nothing to write me up for. I had done precisely what I was told, in writing on record. What HR found instead was a manager who created an unofficial shortcut system in secret after telling his team in an official meeting to follow policy exactly, then tried to punish an employee for actually following his own explicit instructions. That is not a small mistake in a company obsessed with liability and compliance. That is a manager creating legal exposure for the entire company. The regional director scheduled a meeting. I was asked to attend, along with Derek and 2 people from HR. I brought my documentation binder because at this point I had learned that paperwork was the only language management actually listened to. The meeting started calm. Derek tried to frame the whole situation as a misunderstanding, saying he never meant for the policy to be followed that literally, that any reasonable person should have known he meant the spirit of the rule, not the letter of it. That was when HR played the recording. His own voice, clear as day, saying the words follow policy exactly, no exceptions, no shortcuts, no using judgment outside the handbook. The room went quiet in a way I had never heard a conference room go quiet before. Even the HR representative who had played the recording sat still for a moment, letting the silence do the work no one wanted to do out loud. Derek's face went pale, then red, then pale again, like he was cycling through every excuse he had ever used in his life and realizing none of them fit this particular room. The regional director asked me directly if I had ever expressed concern about the policy before implementing it. I said yes, and I had a witness, since I asked Derek in front of the entire team whether he was sure about enforcing full double verification, and he confirmed it publicly. HR confirmed that exchange was in the meeting recording as well. Derek tried one more time to shift blame, saying the warehouse staff should have used common sense. HR reminded him that he had specifically told the team common sense was not part of the handbook and would not be tolerated as an excuse for skipping steps. There was nothing left for him to say. 3 days later, corporate flew someone in. I wasn't in the room for that final conversation, but I heard the outcome by lunchtime the same way everyone else did, through the warehouse floor. Derek was no longer our regional manager. He was walked out that afternoon with a box of his things, the same sharp haircut, but none of the confidence from his first week. The company brought in an interim manager who did something Derek never once considered doing. She asked the warehouse staff what actually worked. Within a week, the handbook was formally updated to reflect the simplified, safe, and fast verification process we had used for years, the one Derek dismissed as sloppy and outdated. Nobody ever mentioned the double verification policy again after that. My documentation binder went into a drawer, unused but never forgotten. Every so often a coworker would walk past my desk, nod once, and say something like, "You really did read that whole handbook, huh?" I would just smile and go back to work, because some lessons don't need to be said out loud twice, especially when you have the paperwork to prove every single word of it, every single time, without fail.